before the first sunrise ever kissed the horizon of the nascent world. A profound and heavy silence saturated the verdant expanses of Eden, where the soil was still damp with the cooling touch of the divine and the very air vibrated with the kinetic energy of a brand new creation waiting for its final crowning architectural masterpiece to be unveiled. This was the moment of the great separation and the great union. It's a cosmic pivot point where the singular image of God would be reflected through the prism of gender, establishing a biological and spiritual rhythm that would echo through every corridor of human history until the end of time. The garden was a riot of untamed perfection, a sanctuary of emerald ferns and crystalline springs where the lions moved with a grace of golden shadows and the wind whispered through leaves that had never known the brittle touch of decay. Adam stood in the center of this symphony, his lungs drawing in the sweet, untainted oxygen of a world that was good. Yet as he named the creatures, observing the paired flight of the doves and the synchronized stride of the great beasts, a shadow of profound realization began to lengthen across his spirit. He saw the reflection of the Creator in the complexity of the eagle's wing and the power of the behemoth, but in all the vast, shimmering expanse of the terrestrial paradise. There was no one to mirror his own soul, no intellect to sharpen his own, and no heart to beat in rhythmic sympathy with his own loneliness. The naming of the animals was not merely a biological census, but a deep, existential discovery of a void that only the architect of the stars could perceive and fill. As the golden light of the first Sabbath eve began to descend, casting long amber fingers across the dust from which he was formed, Adam felt the weight of a solitude that no sunset could soothe. It was here, in the quiet ache of a man who had everything but a peer, that the divine plan moved from the general to the intimate, preparing to perform the first and most sacred surgery in the history of the cosmos. If you find yourself moved by the profound intentionality of this ancient design, please share this episode with someone who needs to know they were created for connection. A supernatural slumber, heavy as the mountain mist and deep as the unplumbed sea, fell upon the first man, pressing him into the soft, fragrant moss of the garden floor as the Creator leaned down into the theater of his own making. This was no ordinary sleep, but a divine suspension of the senses, a holy trance that allowed the Father to work within the very fabric of the human frame, without the interference of pain or the witness of the conscious mind. In the stillness of that moment, the hand that had stretched the galaxies like a curtain reached into the side of the sleeping man, not to take a fragment of his foot to be stepped upon, nor a piece of his head to rule over him, but a rib from beneath his arm to be protected and from near his heart to be loved. The Hebrew text suggests a side or a chamber, implying that a fundamental part of the human essence was being drawn out to be fashioned into something entirely new, yet inextricably linked. As the rib was removed, the wound was closed with flesh, leaving a permanent, invisible seal of sacrifice upon the masculine form. The atmosphere of Eden seemed to hold its breath, the waterfalls muting their roar and the nightingales ceasing their song, as the divine potter began to weave the extracted essence into the feminine form. This was the transition from the singular Adam to the plural humanity, a biological bifurcation designed to eventually produce a more perfect unity than the world had yet witnessed. Archaeological and linguistic evidence from the ancient Near East provides a stunning backdrop to this narrative, revealing how the biblical account stands in stark contrast to the chaotic and often violent creation myths of surrounding cultures like the Enuma Elish, while other traditions viewed the creation of humanity as an afterthought or a means of providing slave labor for the gods. The Genesis record utilizes the specific term tsela for rib, a word used elsewhere in the Tabernacle descriptions to denote structural supports or side chambers of the Holy of Holies. This linguistic choice elevates the creation of woman from a mere biological event to a structural necessity of the cosmic temple, suggesting that without her, the house of humanity is incomplete and incapable of housing the full glory of the divine presence. Furthermore, the concept of the Ezer Kenegdo, often translated poorly as helpmeet, carries the weight of a rescuer, or a strength equal to, a term used predominantly for God himself in the Psalms when he comes to the aid of his people. This evidence shatters the notion of a secondary or subordinate status, instead presenting woman as the essential partner whose presence rescues man from the isolation of his own existence. In the ancient cultural context, where women were often marginalized, the Genesis account was a revolutionary manifesto of ontological equality. The very geography of the Gihon and Pishon rivers mentioned in the text anchors this event in a physical reality that the ancients recognized as the cradle of life, bridging the gap between the mythological and the historical. As the divine hands moved with the precision of a master artisan, the first woman began to take shape. Her form a breathtaking synthesis of the strength of the earth and the delicate beauty of the spirit. She was not made from the dust of the ground like the man, but from the living, refined tissue of a human being, making her the most sophisticated creature in the entire created order, a built masterpiece rather than a formed one. Her eyes opened to the sight of the Creator's smile, her first breath mingling with the fragrance of the tree of life, and her first consciousness being the awareness of a Father who had designed her for a purpose that transcended the physical. She was the answer to a question Adam had not yet learned how to ask, the completion of a symmetry that would allow the image of God to be fully expressed in the world. The Creator then led her through the dappled sunlight of the grove, a father walking his daughter down the first aisle of history toward the place where the man lay awakening from his deep, transformative sleep. Adam opened his eyes to a reality that had been altered forever, seeing for the first time a reflection of himself that was both familiar and gloriously different. The tension of his solitude snapped like a dried twig in the presence of a radiance, replaced by a surge of recognition that moved from his spirit into the very marrow of his bones. If this vision of our shared origin stirs a sense of wonder in your soul, consider subscribing to join us as we uncover more truths hidden in the foundations of the world. The biological and genetic implications of the rib narrative are equally fascinating when viewed through the lens of modern understanding, where the rib is known to be one of the few bones in the human body capable of regenerating if the periosteum is left intact. This scientific detail, though unknown to the ancient writers in a formal sense, provides a hauntingly accurate metaphor for a creation that does not diminish the source, but expands it into a new life. In the ancient world, the breath of life was seen as the animating force that distinguished the animate from the inanimate, and the Genesis account insists that this breath was shared equally between the man and the woman, despite their different modes of formation. The cultural evidence of the Adapa myths and other Mesopotamian legends often portrayed the loss of immortality. Yet only the Hebrew account links the creation of woman directly to the concept of life itself, or Chava, meaning the mother of all living. This theological evidence suggests that the woman was not just a companion, but the guardian of the future, the biological vessel through which the promise of the seed would eventually crush the head of the serpent. The historical weight of this narrative provided the foundation for the uniquely high status of women in the early Judeo-Christian tradition compared to the Greco-Roman world, where women were often viewed as incomplete males. Here, the evidence points toward a deliberate, high-definition design where the feminine is the final crowning touch of the entire creative week. Adam's reaction upon seeing Eve was the first poem ever recorded in the history of the world, a rhythmic outburst of joy that translated the silent longing of his heart into the spoken language of the soul. "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," he cried, a declaration that transcended mere physical observation and entered the realm of covenantal commitment. In that moment, he recognized that she was not a separate species or a different kind of being, but his own self standing before him, a mirror that allowed him to truly see his own identity for the first time. The Hebrew ish for man and isha for woman creates a linguistic bond that is unbreakable, a phonetic echo that mirrors their ontological unity. They stood together in the golden light of Eden, unashamed and vibrant, two halves of a whole that represented the full spectrum of the divine character, mercy and justice, tenderness and strength, intuition and logic. This was the birth of the family, the first institution of human society established before any government, any temple, or any law, rooted entirely in the soil of mutual belonging and divine blessing. The animals looked on as their king finally found his queen, and the morning stars sang together as the harmony of the world was finally resolved into a perfect chord. If you believe this story of original unity is a message the world desperately needs to hear today, please leave a comment below with your thoughts on the beauty of our design. The cumulative evidence of the creation of Eve points toward a reality where human dignity is not a social construct, but a divinely engineered fact. From the archaeological context of the Near East to the linguistic nuances of the Hebrew text, the message is consistent. Woman was created to be the indispensable partner in the stewardship of the earth. This historical and theological framework provides the only stable ground for human rights, as it roots the value of the person not in their utility or their strength, but in their origin. The one-flesh union described in the closing verses of the account is the prototype for all human intimacy. A call to return to a state of transparency and total trust that was lost in the fall, but remains the deepest craving of the human heart. The evidence suggests that we are not the products of a blind, competitive process of survival, but the intentional results of a surgical act of love designed to ensure that no human being would ever truly have to walk alone. To understand the creation of Eve is to understand the nature of God Himself, who exists in a communal relationship of Father, Son, and Spirit, and who fashioned us to mirror that community in the physical world. This is the bedrock of our identity. We are the broken pieces of an original masterpiece, forever searching for the unity that was first celebrated in the silence of a perfect garden under the smile of a satisfied Creator. The story of the first woman is the story of our collective awakening to the necessity of the other, a cinematic reminder that we were never meant to carry the weight of existence in isolation. As the shadows of that first evening deepened over the trees of Eden, the man and the woman stood as a single testimony to a God who fills every void and heals every loneliness with His creative power. May you walk today with the dignity of one who is meticulously designed and the peace of one who is never truly alone. If this journey through the evidence of our origins has touched your heart, please subscribe and join our community as we continue to explore the wonders of the ancient world.